going on with LinkedIn? Okay, cool. All right. All right, those of you that might be joining us, give us just a moment. I want to make sure all the streaming services are connected, and we'll go from there in just a moment. Okay, let's double check this. All right, cool. Those of you. Okay, cool. JB, I would love to
Hey,
have you introduce yourself.
my name is John Brown. I I'm a former music producer, entrepreneur, and now working a family business. So, want to say hello.
Love it, man. Yeah, we'll get into all of that, especially the background. Those of you that are joining us on Twitch, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. I'll relay them to John and then get you some answers. If you're working on something, you don't have a question yet, feel free to just share what you got going on, and we can dig into that and see what John can share in regards to his own, personal experiences, advice, feedback, insights that he may have. Especially if you're trying to get involved in the music industry, you already are. Um, Extra bonus, and yeah, we'll go from there. Let's double check what's going on over here. All right, cool. Yeah, we will wait for this for people to get brave and post some questions, John. I was thinking about, we've got a long history together, grew up together. One of the most kind of formative experiences I had was with you in that minivan that you gutted and kind
Oh
of
wow,
just, yeah, turn you
thought
turn.
about that in a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I feel like, knowing you, that's really kind of like the origin, or at least the
Yeah,
first chapter of you getting real involved in music and engineering and all that. Just, you know, gutting that van and turning it into kind of like like an audio kind of like, theater, right?
yeah,
Yeah, you showed me Incubus for the first time, and it blew my mind, as a teenager. Hi,
yeah.
William. Great to see you joining us over on Start Mata. You know the drill. If you want to jump in and ask any questions, feel free. But yeah, like I'm curious, some of those early experiences that you had, right, when
Mhm.
you're just tinkering, what kind of led you to have that passion for music, but also as producing and engineering? And I just want to hear about that.
Oh, sure. No, I mean happy to share. It's nice to hear first of all that like sometimes you don't really know what you're doing as a kid or anything, and you hear years later like certain things influence people, and like it's certainly been that same way where I've had formative experiences, from people that they were like, oh, I had no idea. So uh, I think to answer the question, really, I was really young, and I was lucky to have a dad that played music at a very young age. And so one of the ways we were able to kind of reconnect and connect at the time was just jamming and learning about music. And it wasn't on a really high level or anything like that. He played drums and showed me how to play. But yeah, I think from there, I had my own moments besides his influential moments that sort of there were times that were like very key moments just like that really stuck in my brain. I remember being uh, you know, probably like first grade and just seeing some uh, elementary school performance of them covering the Beach Boys, like, and I just thought that it was like a music teacher, and I was like in tears, and I just remember like I don't understand you know why that affected me so much. And I think at that early age I was just like obsessed, and then certainly like going on later, learning more about music, learning what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. So finally I found things that I was actually good at that people weren't really just finding like a need early on. I'm like, well, a lot of people are playing guitar, a lot of people are singing, and a lot of people are doing this. Well, where I was like somehow interested in the way that things sounded, and I didn't really know that that meant being a music producer, but I just kind of fell interested in that. I was um, bought like a little 4 track when I was a kid. For my I had one for my birthday to learn how to record, and I didn't really realize a lot of people didn't know about that. So that sort of was using my was able to separate myself at a young age to know that to explain that like, I was able to handle some of the technical stuff while kids were just kind of just playing guitar, and that was useful to like a lot of people. So I just kind of leaned a little bit more into like what I was good at and what was useful. You know what I mean? Uh, so that I think that much answered that question, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's a good, kind of point to build on was that experience you had, right?
Right.
Of holy cow, like this is affecting me emotionally, not really
Mhm.
understanding that, but it
That's
sparked
what it was.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, it sparked this curiosity and passion for music, and it was like a jumping off point for you. And I'm curious, as you got a lot more practice as a musician, and then eventually as a producer, engineer, how much of that that early experience of knowing how much music can impact someone played a role in the methodology that you employed in writing, in recording, engineering, producing, to ideally create an end result in other people that are experiencing the music that you're a part of, right?
Mhm.
Like what was that like?
Early on, or like or throughout the whole thing.
I mean, I would love to hear like both because it's all a journey, right? And I
Right.
imagine like I got
Good question.
yeah, I got like creative background in photography, and it's early on it was very different from how it is now, right? And I'm
Right.
curious, how that evolution changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I love to hear both
Well,
answers.
yeah. Well, it's an evolution, like you're saying. I mean, it's a really good question. So I think early on, when you're a kid or when you're younger, I don't think you're really thinking. I wasn't really thinking too much about like the effect I had on people, right? So I was just kind of, you're kind of like both. I was both interested in a subject, so I was like just being a dork about trying to learn as much as stuff as I can because I wanted to be like somebody. And two, it was also for my own ego, right? So like the better I became at something, I had that skill set in it, and just anybody that it at a time that you're so young, you kind of like makes you feel good to differentiate yourself from other people, right? So subconsciously, I was just really in it for me. I was just in it for because I just like it. Then when I would play music or do something, people responded, and it was just really that simple. It was like nothing overthought other than I just wanted to get better. I was obsessed with getting better, and people responded to when I was getting better. And I was actually, I made friends. I did this. It was nice from that perspective. So, sort of was able to like see a quick. There was like a there was just rewards along the way that kept incentivizing me to continue like growing as someone that's learning music. But then I think in all art, but I mean I don't know, but as I got better and as I got better, I just sort of became the next stage of learning was like, especially as I got into music school, because when I got into music college, everybody's a virtuoso. Everyone is just a talent. Everyone is super good. And we're talking like on a school that was, uh, on a world stage, right? This isn't just like a guitarist that came from, uh, you know, Alabama or something. It was also, people from all around the world that had been leading up to this point. And, I was around people that I would have never been around if I wasn't at this school. And then you start to realize, well, like, I'm not the best. I'm not the greatest. I'm not this. And I never thought I was the best, but you just start to really see how good you are. And that's all I ever really wanted was I was like 17. I was like, I don't know where this is going to lead. I just want to just see how good I am because I don't. It was a real clear decision, which was like I could go. I was into computer programming, computer science, and building websites and doing all this stuff that was kind of making me money at a very young age, or I could follow something that I was just really excited about and not live with a regret. It was like really like two forks in the road. I was like, I got a partial scholarship to study computer science at the University of Miami, or I could go get myself into debt and do something that I'm excited about. And I chose like to go study music, and I had family support so long that it was like something I could have a viable career on, which is a whole other thing. But it really was just saying like, how good am I? I get to a place where I go, wow, now I know how good I am. Oh my God, that's like really humbling. And then the next stage of it was realizing after a couple years that it really doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter like what you think of yourself as in a place where you're like how good you are, but what matters is like the people on the other side, like what are they experiencing and how are they affected and like what's going to move them and like sort of switching it to being of service, right? Which then leads down to the evolution of like getting to the point where once you get to that level that you're able to share music on that widespread level, like millions of people listening, and even if for me as a producer it's indirectly, like it's not the John Brown show, it's just like a guy that helps support bands, but at the end of the day, I've been part of music where millions and millions of people have heard that. The evolution of that just became then, well, like, whoa, this is a crazy responsibility, and like I don't know that I feel good doing things just for money because people are experiencing this on a large level, and I had to kind of go backwards even more, which was like, well, I want to be careful with what I actually do because I want it to be really good, not doing it because it's commercial and like it's successful and da 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 da. Da. So I mean, it's a unique question that not many people really ask. It's just there's a timeline, and it's sort of this like you know you go backwards a little bit by going forwards.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's important, and I think something that, I mean, the question itself, like, is something you haven't been asked, often, but it's
I don't,
something that, people don't ask themselves enough, right? In regards to,
correct. Just
yeah,
which is 100% like the why when you're doing something on that level, and I yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a very very important question to ask yourself when you're doing something that has that type of scope or capability, right?
and you're touching on a couple different things too that I think anyone that's creative, especially creative people,
Right.
whether it's visual art, audio art, something else, writer, anything, right? There's this passion for the art, the
Mm-hmm.
the pure expression
Mm-hmm.
of yourself and feelings, thoughts, statements, and turning that into a tangible form that others can experience, that you can experience for
It's a
yourself and then
need.
share.
Yeah, it's a need more than a want for a lot of creative people, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. And but then at the same time, right? And like you touched on, there is that realization that in order to turn that passion into a career, a livelihood,
Mm-hmm.
right? You need to understand how to commercialize it. And early on, like when we were kids, right? Like I'm sure we had this conversation, and like if not us directly, right? When we were growing up,
Yeah.
our
Okay.
friends, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, they're sellouts. They're such sellouts, right? And
Right.
I'm curious, having now done this as a career and reached some real amazing heights with it. Like how would you, I guess, speak to someone younger who is still kind of battling with that dichotomy of the pure form of the art and the commercialization of it, and where that balance is and how to manage that?
Well, I think the thing is that at the time that we were growing up, it's like there was a lot more of a machine to help incentivize and develop talent. I think now it's sort of like, because of the way copyrights are and because of the way the music industry's changed, it's all kind of in the hands of the creator. So the artist has most of the control. You own your own masters, you can own your own everything. But that also is a double-edged sword, because a lot of creatives don't know what to do with that. I mean, I myself included, like, I have the potential probably to come out with my own music 100%, and I've done so, but it's really really hard because it's all on you, whereas it's nice to be part of a team. Like, I tend to be able to finish things when it's on a team. I'm on a team level, right? So I think, fortunately, everything's on the shoulders of the artist now, which is good. But at the same time, when you are in that position, you, you can just, I guess, you have to also keep in mind that where your career is going to go, like album one to album two to album three, and like what your timeline, what your, like, where you see yourself, because you can just get wrapped up in the art. So it's like having this third, just like an objective perspective on what you're actually doing is really important, rather than just creating to just be like, that's, I think there's a place for it. I think somebody explained to me once, which was like, this is the best advice I got. So when you're creating something, think about it as if you have a big house and there's different rooms in the house. So in a house, you have a bedroom, you have all these, you do these different things in a living room, you have different, you sleep in a bedroom, you have a playroom, you have all this stuff. Like, creativity can be kind of put into one room in a house, where you like, you do that and you get hyper creative for a period of time, and then you're done for that period of time, and then you go back and look at what you did after you were creative. It's not getting stuck in a loop, like, should I be this creative, should I be this, should I make a commercial, should I not. It's like, go be creative, go do your thing, but then be done being creative, and then look at it from a different lens, and go to and take that mess you made in one room in your house, and go move it to your next room in your house, which is going to be an editing phase, and put it in a, a mixing phase, or whatever that is. So it doesn't, like, you're not hindered as a creative. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is that they're just, as a creative, you don't know where that limit is, because in the creative process you're like, I don't even know. Whereas I've had the most success with working with other creatives, where I'm just like, go do you, like, just throw everything at the wall and really get as weird as you want to get, but also know that that stuff is going to be objectively looked at, with, to see what's good and what's not. And that's okay if stuff is not good, but be able to move on from that, right?
No, for sure. And I'm always like a fan of like these analogies and fun analogies. I often get yelled at by my youngest brother Blake for overusing them, but I think that was really well said. And we've got some follow-up questions from John Walter Mosi Hanton, wonderful photographer. So his initial question was asking what your Grammy nominations are for, but then he asked a couple other follow-up questions while you're talking about your analogy. Was what do you do when you're running out of space in your creative house and physical house, actually, if I'm being honest. So both both apply for
Okay.
that mental space, and also
Yeah.
managing your physical space, because I don't know if you're similar to a lot of creative people out there. We get a little bit geeked out on gear and
Yeah.
start accumulating things, and that can be
Sure.
a whole other like trap, right?
Right.
But yeah, let's start first with like when you're trying to like manage that creative house that you're building, and all these different elements that you're bringing into it.
Well, I think now, because everything is just, especially with AI and all that stuff, I think now, I'm the easiest way is to set limits. So, especially if you're well versed in many many things, and you have a lot of equipment, and you have a lot of things, and you spent all the time learning. And I think like, when you're asking that question, you're at a specific stage in your creative development, where you're like still accumulating somebody said to me the other day, like you're still accumulating data points. You're still like learning after every experience. You're still buying this piece of gear, whether it's photography or if it's not. And you're like, oh, this can do this and that can do this and da 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 da. Da. And then it gets to a point where you're like, okay, now you're really proficient at it. You don't have to think about it. Okay, great. But then really it's about setting the limits on like, well, why don't we do an exercise where we're like only using from a music standpoint, you're only using like analog tape, or you're only going to be doing things from on equipment from like 1980s to 1990, 1998. Like organize it by year so that you can kind of get into an era of time. Or I mean, I did projects where I was like, I'm only going to use live instrumentation. Like I'm going to be using no editing, like 100% all performance. Anything is going to be live played, like zero MIDI was the rule. And like once I made those rules, then you have less anxiety about what you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that because those restrictions, right? They're limiting the scope of
Yeah,
your focus, right? It's like, yeah, okay, these are the boundaries, and I don't
right,
need to worry about going off on all these different tangents along the way.
right,
And it's kind of interesting, like you like what you just described in terms of like those different exercises. It reminded me of Bjork, like going
right.
from Bjork album to Bjork album. They're very much rooted in these limitations that she's setting for herself, and like I think it was Medulla. It was purely vocal instrumentation. So there's
Right, right.
yeah,
That's yeah, yeah,
yeah, and then I think Homogenic was recorded in a cave, right? And like that was like the limitation. Like whatever they can bring into the cave is what they're using and how they're doing it. But it's I think an interesting and beneficial exercise for everyone that's being creative, but also for like like startup founders. And this kind of touches on the idea of building a minimum viable product, the MVP, right? You're setting
right.
these very strict restrictions, guidelines for the scope of what you're doing, so it forces that focus and prevents those tangents going, into all different
Yeah.
areas.
Well, that's what's the beauty of the startup, right? The beauty of the startup is actually the fact that there are limitations with it. You only have a certain amount of money. You only have certain people that you know. You only have certain experience developing a product. You have all these limits, and people look at that when you're starting as just like, oh, I wish I had this, and I wish I had this. And it's just like actually it's to your benefit if you just to a point everyone needs to live, but if you're in a position where you can survive through those limits, that's what's going to push the product, because you don't have to make those aren't decisions you have to make. I mean, once someone gives you $1 million budget, it's easy to spend it and it's easy to go off in the wrong direction. But if you don't even have that option, there's only pretty much one direction to try. So go that way.
Yeah, absolutely. John says, or other John Walter Mosi Hanson says, currently shooting a roll of Tri-X on my old 80s Minolta right now. So he's going
Uh,
through a fun little exercise himself. Um, and he adds, but to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of film anymore. I'm with you. I haven't been a fan of film for a long time, but that's mostly because of my own anxieties that film brings, where I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I can't see it, and being able to review immediately, it takes a lot of anxiety away from me when I'm doing like professional projects. If I'm doing
right,
like my own artwork, right? That's where like these things change. The context changes, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, John, in regards to like you know contextualizing things and understanding what room this house is for, or what
right,
room this house is for, and utilizing it appropriately, right?
right.
So yeah, it's good, yeah, to hear this extra little stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's it.
Uh, let's double check. Okay, so yeah, so people that have joined us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, that haven't heard this before, please feel free to post questions for John. I'll relay them. Um, if you are simply working on something, you don't have a question yet, and it could be, just an idea in your head, or it's an actual project and you've actually have revenue and stuff already, share it. It'd be wonderful to hear what you got going on and see if, John has any interesting insights or feedback or advice to share with you. Yeah, let's double check what's going on here real quick. Okay, right. Um, there's so yeah, I wanna jump over to you being a startup founder that you created a little bit ago, and there's a lot of transferable skills, especially when you're coming from a creative background. When you're designing a product which has an intended experiential result that you want people to have with it, that delivers benefits and is enjoyable to use, right? I'm curious, when you were first working on Partnerly, what was that experience like? Again, in terms of bringing transferable skills and a methodology to that project when you're, first working on the MVP.
Well, I mean, it's funny because when that project came along, it started as like an idea, like why can't I be someone that starts an app or whatever it was. I was just like, it's at a time when a lot of people were doing it, and I had skills doing in music and also like web design prior to that. And um, yeah, I think that like I didn't know what would be useful. Like I really didn't. I didn't sit there and go like I could do this, I can do that. Other than when I met my partner at the time, I knew what he was good at, and I knew what resources he had. And then from there, like he was pretty had a lot of experience with brands, marketing, um, sort of like connecting with companies and doing sales and just getting in front of a lot of people. And I cornered myself as, well, I could at least come at this with my website experience, my music background, and I know how to have a project. I know how to start a project and finish a project, like with success, and the success rate has been really high. So how do I take that experience on knowing we're kind of going into the dark from a startup space, which is like we could fail and probably will fail, but how do I take that experience producing music on a creative level where you're dealing with highly creative people that are second guessing themselves and doubting themselves the whole time, to be like, I've already created some crazy things that have been successful in my eyes. So at least I can kind of help guide that process, having walked that walk before. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. And there's
It was a new place to walk, but at least I've like done it before, right?
yeah, and that's where, like, those transferable skills come into place. Is when you're a creative person and either creating for yourself artwork and stuff, it's still something that I think a lot of people don't celebrate enough and don't kind of take the time to recognize how important it is to finish something, even if
Right.
it's not what you imagined your head. And this is especially when you're earlier,
Yeah.
in your journey. You're still figuring out. You haven't yet gained that proficiency as you talked about, right?
Right.
But you're still finishing something, and that's
Hmm.
worth celebrating. That is something that is ultimately putting you ahead of a lot of people that never finish something, right? And it's this skill that you can then take to project management and other any sort of thing, like whether it's building a startup product or a putting on an
It's
event, whatever.
Yeah, it's everything. Just to jump in, it's literally everything, because it's just being able to look at something that's a little bit scary, or like not, you don't. It's just being able to look at something that's scary, or your whatever it is, and just be like, I'm okay walking forward and figuring it out. And if it means you crash and burn, that means you crash and burn. But like usually, if you put enough attention to something, you will figure something out of what you're trying to make and create.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna dig into this a little bit more. But we got a couple new people that have joined us over on LinkedIn. Welcome.
Nice,
Um,
nice. Let's see that.
yeah, so please, yeah, post your questions. I'll relay them to John. You can also share what you're working on, and there's a good chance that John will have some insights, some feedback, some advice to share. Um, John, I want to touch on what you just talked about real quick. That fear and that crash and burning, you know, uh, uh, experience, whether it happens or not, right? There's always that fear, and that's usually what causes people to hesitate of going to the finish line.
Yeah,
We had this wonderful mentor for an incubator weekend that we organized, and he was the keynote speaker, and his theme of the weekend was "Done is better than good."
right.
And yeah, I'm sure you understand that immediately, but I like to hear your own thoughts on that, especially with your like pulling from your own experiences and anecdotes in regards to getting something done that isn't what you imagined it to be, but you still got it done, and what those real lessons were that you're able to apply to develop your skills further, gain wisdom, and ultimately feel better about yourself in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that that's a really key part here, right? Which is to complete something. I think that when you're in a band and you're early on, and it's one thing to be playing in your garage or playing with your friends. It's another thing to go play a show in front of people, right? Right. So just go do that. It's one thing to talk about we should make an album or create a demo, and then I don't remember. I remember how many people seem so confused growing up where um, it was just like this anxiety to put together a demo, it was always so bizarre to me because I was like, I don't know, just like do it. Like what's like what what's the what's the holdup? Is it the technical holdup? Okay, that's fine. Well, then you're either going to learn how to make it or you're going to bring somebody in that'll help you make a demo. I don't know. So like that sort of translates into everything, and I think that I think I've talked to you about this a lot, but it's that fear of not, and I know it's a common theme through a lot of people, and it's this fear of failure that really stunts a lot of things. And because you can create something, you can get embarrassed, it could not be as good. I mean, there's so many times I've worked on mixes that um, I got really insecure doing this mix, and it sounds like, oh, just make a mix and you're good at it, but like you have to realize that I wasn't really born with that skill set, right? Like nobody is. So I remember mixing music and playing it in my car and being like really insecure that, oh my gosh, this sounds terrible. Or like I would play it for somebody and they'd be like, they didn't really get it. Or like it didn't translate on someone's headphones right. And I was like, oh my God, I just spent, you know, cumulatively like 2 3 days working on something and then it's total dog shit. Like but this is the real conversation, which is like I would sit in a car and go back and listen to something being terrible and being like, wow, I should just quit. Like this is a big waste of time. This is a big, like, what am I, like, just completely tripping myself out and being like, this is so stupid. What am I doing? And I think that I started to notice patterns. So like I would just do it anyway. I would just finish it anyway. And I would get to a point with like a mix where I would try so hard, and eventually like after 4 days and not giving up on this mix, it would come out okay. It would come out like listenable, right? Or it would come out like pretty close to like what, and it wasn't there, but at least like I got through that anxiety phase, and at least it was something that I could wrap my head around. Like, okay, I did this. Maybe the kick drum was too loud or whatever, but I'd be like, all right, I did it. Fine, fine, fine. So the point is, I started noticing patterns with that process where as I got better at mixing, or as I got better at producing, and as I got better at being creative, I would know when I would hit that point of anxiety. And I kind of got to a point where like I would laugh at it and I would be like, "Oh, okay, we're here. That's good." Because now I know that I'm actually on the way. Now I know we're like getting close. And I just need to like put more energy into it that I am used to putting in, be uncomfortable about it. And usually, every time I've done this in the past 25 times I did a song, or I mean, I mixed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs, I would be like, okay, it's going to be good because I'd hit that point of anxiety. Does that make sense? So I would start to embrace the anxiety, the fear, the doubts, the this and that, because then I would know I'm on the path. I know I need to put this much effort in. I'd be like, kind of laugh about it, like, all right, this is going to suck. Like the client is pissed off. This is going to suck because this is it. And like all the things that could inhibit you to like want to stop, you at least now know that that's a predictable process.
No, I love that, and I think that's important, and that's part of the practice, right? And that's why you continuously practice, and it goes for anything, right? Like again, anything that you're doing, it's very rare to have that like natural kind
Yeah.
of like instinct for it, or you know,
And if you do, that's only going to get you so far. Like
mm,
it's only going to get like you, like nobody, like it's great. That's great. It got you like ahead of most people by having a natural talent, but you still are going to have a roadblock.
exactly, and a lot of that too is the unknowns, the adversity, right? And that's where the practice really is important, because you get to experience these things that either you never thought of because you didn't have that humility, and you have these high expectations yourself because it's come so naturally for you, or you're just like a normal person and it's just the normal experience that everyone has. At some point you hit a roadblock, right? And the
Right.
more you have this experience, like you've explained, the
Right.
easier it is to overcome that adversity, to sit with it, to feel okay with it, and then redirect your thoughts, your emotions, your energy towards the positive,
Yeah.
where you're gonna get past it. I'm curious, like during these processes, as you started developing, this awareness for these patterns, or as you did you have any sort of like methodology attached to that, like journaling, or some other form of documentation with what you're doing and how you're doing it, so you could you know evaluate those actions?
Yeah, like any sort of journaling that I did along the way was more on a personal level. I don't think it was actually more on like a practical, like project basis or whatever. I think that to document what was happening, I was working in a medium that's all like, audio files and stuff like that. So I was able to go back and like re-listen to everything and track it that way by date and whatever. But um no, I didn't like, I didn't quantify it. I didn't sit there and go like, well, I did this much better. I didn't I never did that. And I think that other than like playing music for people and bouncing it off of people and getting their feedback, I think I just kept going because I figured none of it really matters as long as I just keep trying and keep going. Like all of the stuff that it's just going to take away from you're just I'm just hyper analyzing it. Like just mix another song, and I don't know if that's correct or if there's a better way to do it. But personally, I didn't. I just had to sit with my own self and just be like, all right, that took too long, or you know, and then realizing one day, wow, I just mixed a song in a day, like wow. And then it got to be a joke where it was, I would still get the anxiety of things taking 1 or 2, 3 days to mix or produce, and then I get a call to do something, and my girlfriend with my wife now, but at the time I would be like, oh my god, I got I got so much stuff to do. And I would forget that I've been doing it for so long that I can knock something out in like 4 hours. And then I'd be like, and she would just be like, you're nuts. Like you do this in your sleep, but you still have the same anxiety like you don't. Like I'd be like, I gotta block a full day for this because this is gonna be a fucking mess. And then it was like, oh, 3 hours, I'm done. But I that's me personally. Like I always do that.
No, but I think that's cool too to like hear, and it's it's relatable for sure, and there's benefits to that, right? Like there the idea of giving yourself that buffer zone, right? And then getting done real quick. It's like, oh, well, I got all this free time now. That's awesome. Cool, right? But the other takeaway too is that it's become muscle memory for you doing a lot of these things because of the
Right.
ongoing practice, right?
Right.
And
All it is.
that's really the goal, and that's why it's so important, regardless of like, who's listening to this, what their field is, what their goals are, to remember that it's invaluable to continuously put yourself in positions to practice and get, certain aspects of these things done, whether that's practicing pitches or, practicing your instrument, practicing mixing, whatever. It's all part of the journey. It's all going to be incredibly beneficial, even if it's not turning out the way you want it to at this time. As you continuously practice that, awareness and mindfulness, whether that's, journaling or documented or something else, as long as there's that attention to the detail of what you're doing and that
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
self-analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. You do have to pay attention to the details. There's no doubt. I mean, that's the game, is like really asking those questions in the creative process of like, for music specifically, we're gonna be like, you know, I mean, everything from what would happen if the snare drum is moved 1 decibel up, decibel down, kick drum this, changing it to different sound. How does it hit on a stereo versus, headphones? Like all these small little details that go in with. I mean, it can get into some crazy stuff with crazy technical, but letting those questions run rampant in your head because that's okay. You're gonna forget. You're gonna forget everything anyway. It's just carving those neural pathways of the exercise of questioning thing, to your point, where that becomes it's a muscle that you're continually doing, and you can then be aware enough that you're like, okay, I've done that so many times in this particular circumstance where I'm working with this singer that's having this problem, and then da, 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 like this is the song. Is it worth me running down, question mark lane and asking all these minute details, or does the singer need to just like go to bed and like take a break? Like it's like it's really having that objective like lens where sometimes, I mean, there's so many projects where people are up late trying to like record these vocals and this and that, and then get the hot tea and this, and why don't I try it here? Let's rearrange the song, and then I'm just like, come back tomorrow. Like it's fine. Let's just like go do something else. Go watch a movie. Like what? Really? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And then people trip out about the money. Like, well, I booked the studio session, and and I'm just like, relax. Like we'll just do it tomorrow. It's fine. And then they come back first thing in the morning, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, you came fresh, and like it just got done in an hour. And it's just recognizing those patterns in people that I think a lot of people, then they've never walked that, they just get so in their head, and you're like, you're 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 here for I like to tell people, like, regardless of what you're doing, if you're still learning, if you got a startup, if you got an album, if you got a song, if you got a whatever project it is that you're creating in your mind, and then you get to a point where, let's say, you're recording it with somebody, or you're starting it with somebody, and you're doing something, like the mentality that I had that always worked was, I firmly believe that if I'm in a room with somebody, let's say if I was with Will I Am, or if I was with Chris Brown or whatever the name drop, I would believe I'm in that room for a reason. I'm here for a reason. Like nobody would put me in this room if I wasn't okay to be in this room. And once you kind of believe in yourself from that perspective, you lose the anxiety and you do what you need to do. And then like whatever happens, happens. But it's that belief system that really changed the the question mark of the creative process. I mean, I think I kind of went off on a tangent, but I think it was an important point to kind of touch on.
No, it was a beautiful tangent and point to make, and I think it relates to, again, what we're talking about in regards to getting things done and celebrating that and remembering to continuously celebrate that. But that's another thing that a lot of people struggle with across the board. It doesn't matter what, career
Yeah,
you're trying to build or a business, whatever. This self-doubt, this,
yeah,
imposter syndrome, all of
so
that.
easy. It's so easy, and just to elaborate on it, it's like I think that people don't realize like if you're in a position like you're like the person that was listening that was like, hey, I've got this creative house and it's so like packed and like what do I even do? And I my answer was to limit yourself, but like even if you limit yourself, like if you don't believe that you have created this environment for yourself to be creative in for a reason, and that's you're there for a reason. You just may not know what the reason is yet. If you can get to that standpoint, that's the best. That's the best starting off point for any creative adventure because you're like you're coming off with confidence. You're coming off without moving in fear, and ultimately that's when the real joy of whatever you're creating is going to come out, and that's what people want to hear is like someone being joyful, being creative, having a crazy good time with a startup, like someone just having a ball, like with some friends and like putting something together, it being scrappy but just like not being so just not so serious, like that is the energy that people are attracted to because they're like, wow, you're like you just like not that you don't give a shit, it's like in a dick, but it's like you're just like having fun and you don't care. And it's like it starts from just some self-confidence, I think.
No, yeah, very well said. And John Walter has a follow-up question that kind of fits into this. What are
Yeah.
just some good methods that John has used to get out of ruts where one is feeling a lack of motivation to create or and work on new projects? Kind of similar, yeah.
Work, working out, just exercise 100%. Like that's just to me just like taking care of your physical body and taking care of yourself first. It's like period and a story, which comes into the discipline action, which is like if you're not disciplined about like your physical, you know, health, then that's going to be hard to translate into your creative health. So like making sure you maintain yourself first, and then you get to a place where like even if you wake up and you're not motivated, and you're just then like resetting physically is a good starting point, and then that gives you the time and the balance to be like, hey, there's not as much pressure on you to be creative, to perform, to do anything because you're focusing on something else. You're able to focus on something else for a while, then you can look at what you're trying to do creatively, like more objectively from a different lens. You're like able to be like, oh, I wasn't thinking about this for now because you physically can't. You're like playing a sport or doing whatever, running or whatever you're doing for you know, yes, you can think about things, but you're just not in front of whatever it is you're doing to do that activity.
I think that's wonderful advice too, and it kind of touches on a theme that has kind of uncovered itself with what you've been talking about, John. It's you know making sure you're taking care of yourself first, and that was extended to other people that you're working with, like the singer, right? Making sure
Right.
that they're not pushing themselves too far to a point where the quality of their work, of what they're contributing, is taking a hit because they're overworking themselves, they're burning themselves out, and that can happen you know over the long term of a project or a career or whatever it is, or it can happen, very quickly during a day, right?
Yeah.
Just practicing that awareness, that self-awareness for yourself, but also extending that awareness to others that you're working with, and making sure that you're extending empathy and compassion to yourself and others to ultimately ensure that everyone is in the healthiest, most joyful, most productive place they can be in without forcing it, right? And so I think it's wonderful that you bring up, this discipline too of like, your own, well-being and health, and going to get some exercise, whatever that may be, like you mentioned, like, playing a sport or going running or something. Like, it's
Yeah.
important too for people to experiment and, really discover whatever that is. Um, yeah, it's a wonderful way, like you said, to take your mind off stuff, recalibrate, everything. But at the end of it, yeah, you're gonna feel better physically, mentally, because movement is medicine, is like on my PT, my physical therapist wall. That's what it says. And it's very true. Like every single time I go in there, I got chronic issues, pain stuff. I could be, pretty like, anxious, depressed, whatever. I come out of there after moving around and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get to work. I'm focused. I'm feeling
Yeah.
good, rejuvenated. Yeah.
Yeah, if anything, like that has become more of a priority in my life at this point in my life than anything. Rather than being creative, it's just like taking care of like physical health and making sure that as you get older, I kind of like turned it up a little bit more, which is not what I expected, but it that just follows like a path of happiness and like what's the end goal. Everybody just wants to be happy at the end of the day, and I think that like you kind of realize like, hey, it may not be like, the boatload of cash that you are looking at, when you sell your company because it's going to kill you on the way up. Like it just was like, take care of your health. And like, I just started noticing like that was just such an immediate return on so many things. I was like, okay, that was a big, I don't want to call it a pivot, but it was just kind of like a big, I learned a lot getting through some really, really heavy projects by knowing that taking care of your physical health was so um, important through those processes. And it's like, well, I've already learned that, but excuse me one sec. But it can continue on for the rest of your life, right?
No,
Um,
absolutely. I think it's really important too. Like,
I also think one thing too, just before I forget, was that I had a student once that asked the same question because I used to teach a lot, and he was really concerned about like not having inspiration, and also and I was asking about the amount of time he was spending on this particular project or practicing in this, and the guy like didn't really like, he had been working on something for he's been working on something for I think like a month straight and like not leaving his studio. And I just kind of sat at him and I just said like, go. He didn't have much money, and I was like, you need to just not do that. Like take a break. And he was a little confused because he'd been working so hard and was the type that was just like, it was just going to die on the sword. And I said, well, you need to do something. He said like, I don't know what do you mean? And I was like, I don't. He's like, I don't have money to go travel or do this. And I just said, do you have money for like a bus fare? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, go take a bus. And he's like, where? And I was like, I don't know. Just go somewhere. Like, and he was kind of shocked that that was an advice on his project. I was like, just go see something different. Like, just go look at something and go talk to people you wouldn't normally talk to. Go to a part of town you weren't an LA native, so he was like from another country. And I was just like, just go like, I don't know, go somewhere, go to the Hollywood side, just go do stuff and go on a hike, and then come talk to me next week after you have done stuff. He's like, that's it? You don't want me to do anything? I was like, no, absolutely not. Just like stop.
no, that too is kind of like what, I wanted to touch on is
Yeah.
especially in startup circles, entrepreneurial circles, in some cases too, with like, those very, I guess, they refer to like those A type personalities that are building a career. People mistake obsession for work ethic, right?
Right. Right.
And it's very dangerous, as you know, the anecdote you just shared, and it does more harm than good to the project, to themselves, like their health, their mental state, all these different areas. And it's so important to create these healthy boundaries where you're not working all the time and you're experiencing other stuff. And this comes up often with pretty much every single mentor that we talk to. This idea of innovation and creativity, it's
Right.
a byproduct, as you just laid out, of the experiences you're having in life. If all you're doing is a single thing, or this very, very kind of cluster of things that are very related, and it's always the same stuff, you're limiting those outside experiences that are going to show you new ways of doing things, or new feelings and thoughts and people and all these different things, which contribute to your tool set to be creative and also innovative, right? And those are like both kind of in,
Yeah.
like they work in tandem. And so yeah, I think it's so, again, wonderful that you call attention to this and you share this wonderful story. And yeah, it doesn't take a lot. Just go do something that you haven't done before. It, in a lot of cases, I experienced myself. It's very discomforting, and I've been pushing myself more and more to just go do something. Whether that's like, jumping on my bike and just rolling around the neighborhood, or going to, like, a place like you said, like, oh, I haven't been to like the Hollywood sign. I'm gonna go check that out. Easy peasy, right? But it all
Right.
contributes to that, worldly experience. Another thing too, like you kind of touch on, is this idea of happiness or fulfillment. And if you're working obsessively on these things, whatever that might be, you're robbing yourself all these other experiences that are going to contribute to that happiness, to that fulfillment. And it doesn't take big things, it's the little things that matter the most in life. And my own experience with health issues and such, you could be dead by the end of this office hours right now. You could just drop dead. So, do
Right.
you really want to be an obsessive person that's foregoing all these different experiences in life and only be working towards this goal that may not materialize? Like this idea of like, oh, I'm gonna have $1 billion exit and I'm gonna have all the money I ever needed to do whatever I want, when you could be experiencing life right now and just enjoying the journey of this all. So yeah, I think it's beautiful that you
If
brought
you
that
have
up.
a, I think if you have a clear, like, if you have a clear vision, and like, there's a, you need to be obsessed and you need to look at stuff for sure. But I think there's just a clear line of like being able to like really quantify progress as you're going through that. And if you're hitting a roadblock for just so long, at a certain point, you go, I just need to take a break or change it up to do something a little bit different to get some perspective. But that, I just want to make sure you still need to have that tenacity to get something crazy done. And there is going to be a sacrifice, but sometimes when you take a break like that, it helps you figure out your why, meaning like if you can kind of figure out, well, why are you doing something, and why are you so focused on this, and why, and if, some people need clarity on that. If you can make sure that your why is covered, then you can kind of have that tunnel vision going forward for a period of time.
No, yeah, absolutely. And again, it just comes back to what those healthy boundaries are for yourself, and
Yeah.
you know, whatever that is. John Mosi asks, "What are some good methods to get you motivated to stay physical when you aren't feeling motivated and just want to sit at home and play with your new Nintendo?" Like, yeah,
Yeah.
how do you, like, if you know that there's this thing that you need to do that's outside of, like, this, how do you force yourself to get over that hump?
I mean, look, I mean, for me, I've learned it at a younger age, which was like I got to a place physically that I wasn't happy with, and that forced me to do that. But what I would say is to sort of set a realistic goal, which is to start really small with something, and that it's okay to if you're gonna if like the idea of going for an hour run is daunting to you, or going to a gym or playing a sport, something as long as short as, hey, today I'm going to go to the gym, but I'm going to walk on a treadmill for 5 minutes, and that's it. I'm going to go home. It's setting up the pattern for you to do something over and over again every single day, so that it actually becomes a habit that your body wants to do. And it's just like it's not about the outcome of that day of what you're working out or doing exercising. It's actually just like if you can force yourself to go show up somewhere for 5 minutes and then come home, then the next day you show up for 10 minutes, then the next day you show up for 15 minutes. Like that short progression is like it's far more than anything else than any workout or anything. And it's just kind of just force yourself to like I only need to go somewhere for a little bit and it's fine.
Yeah, again, beautifully said, and something too I've learned. It, if it kind of goes back to again like different elements of being a founder, being an entrepreneur, where it's so important to set and manage your expectations, and you got to set them where they're realistic, but also at the same time, like you're saying, do things that push through the discomfort in the littlest way to start building that foundation of momentum, and then you can continuously build on that. And you don't need to get hard on yourself for not doing it for 15 minutes or an hour. Celebrate the fact that you did it right, and it's like, oh shit, like at least I went out there and I got something done. And
Yeah.
tomorrow, or like throughout the week, I'll do a little bit more. And it does a couple things, and it's just like going back to the practice of working on your music, or photography, or whatever it is. You're developing those skills and those muscles and that muscle memory, and like you said, it starts to build itself into a habit, which kind of like transcends from the discomfort of it all to
Mhm.
a desire for it, because you've become it's become this attachment, a habit, right? And you're like, oh, I gotta do it, like I feel weird if I'm not doing it.
Right.
So
You feel weird if you don't. It's worse to not do it because you're gonna feel weird. So you just go do it anyway. That's really like what it is.
yeah, okay. Yeah, John Walter Mosey Hanton, thank you so much for a wonderful contribution to these questions. I am noticing that, yeah, we're on time, JB. So yeah, I
Yep.
want to thank you first and foremost for this incredibly insightful discussion, and sharing a lot of wonderful anecdotes and advice and feedback, or some feedback,
Yeah.
to people in the community. And I hope everyone that joined us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and over here on Start Mata got something really valuable about it. I did. I'm feeling real motivated and inspired to get back to work on some stuff right when we're done with this. John, do you have anything that you want to leave the community with? Any, announcements, final thoughts, anything?
No, I mean, I think really it's just I just want to say that um, I've been a big supporter of Gary for a while, and I think that just the community that's being built you know is inspiring to me because it's just people that are at this this point where they're about to do something great, or they're already doing something great and they need a little bit of a kick in the butt. So no, I think really, you know, it's the motivating part of everything is really good to see, and um, happy to help where I can. It's just nice to be around people that are creative. That's all.
Deeply appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And
Yeah.
yeah, we got so many fun memories of you, man. I'm excited that we're making new ones. Heck yeah.
Yes, come around. Let me know.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Yeah. So with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. We got a lot more fun mentors coming up on the schedule, so keep an eye on LinkedIn, on 805startups.com, on Eventbrite, wherever, posting it. So yeah, thank you again. All right.